Welcome back to the panel Broadcaster Strategic Insights. So we have the pleasure to welcome as panelists Nuno Sanchez from Kaltura, Peter Rosberg from the Danish Broadcasting Corporation, and then we have Jan Lickdijk from Nova Group. So this panel will be moderated by Monique van Dusseldorp. So Monique, you have the floor.
Well, thank you so much. Glad to have you all here out there in Europe. The sun is shining today and you are behind your screens, as we should be right now. We originally had another speaker at this panel, and I just want to bring it up. It was Natalia Gotchak was supposed to join us from RTV Slovenia, Director of TV. When we spoke to her last week, she had huge protests outside the public broadcaster. And right now, they're under a cyber attack. I mean, we wish her luck over there. And we also are aware that in this session, we're going to talk about diversifying and advertising and new revenue streams and so forth. But at the heart of this, there's also an industry that really is there to protect knowledge, news, entertainment, wisdom. And, you know, she's fighting a hard battle over there in Slovenia. Now, Nuno, Jan, and Peter, we have a lot of topics to discuss, but let's first meet the three of you. Let's start with Nuno from Kaltura. Nuno, where are you? Nuno Sanchez, yes. Tell us a little bit more about what Kaltura does, because I think not everybody knows this.
Of course. So Kaltura is a leading provider of TV solutions. Our ambition is to essentially power any video mission for any company. So we started in the realm of video APIs about the time YouTube was being sold to Google. We've moved that to create vertical solutions for education and for enterprise. And the business unit that I run and that was been created in 2015 is the Media and Telecom, and we offer solutions for media and telecom companies to essentially be able to, if you're a media company, pretty much offer Netflix-like white branded service that allows you to compete at scale with.
Okay. So a white label on-demand services, basically. In this particular field, I mean, I know you have a long working history in the telecom industry, but in this particular field that you're working in now, who is the, I mean, Kaltura, who's the competitor? What does the market look like for this kind of service?
It depends a lot in which kind of footprint you're looking at. I think in the media space, there are quite a lot of players out there, some new, some old, and they are offering, I would say, solutions that tend to be relatively light. While Kaltura's proposition is we come from the telco world with what is now a robust cloud proposition, and we're pushing it down so that pretty much everyone can benefit from it. On the telco side, there are a lot of historical players on that space, but none new that I would mention. But so
you don't have any competitors, okay? No, but so you offer the whole service. Well, we'll come back to that. What the service is and what it means for the strategies of different broadcasters. Jan, CEO of Nova TV. You reach a lot of people with Nova TV, right? Tell us a little bit more about what you do with Nova TV.
Hi, everyone. We're the largest commercial broadcaster in the Czech Republic. We're a part of CME, which runs broadcasters in 4 other Central European markets. We've diversified recently, intensely. We, apart from free-to-air world of television, where we operate 5 channels, we also operate 2 paid channels, sports channels. We've also run our SVOD service, and we also run our AVOD service and our digital news portal. So we've tried to cover the target audiences wherever they find themselves.
Okay.
We had a very good year last year, despite the pandemic, and we managed to recover from this year's pandemic also very well. We rebounded, so the world of TV looks well and healthy.
Good to you. Yeah. Well, people are watching a lot of TV, but you have also managed to pick up production easily, because in some cases the production side is dwindled because of all the Corona rules.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was there was a period of a few months where we really struggled because of the restrictions, and not only the restrictions as on the formal side, but also our own effort to protect our staff, our actors, our directors, and all that. But this has managed to be sorted out sometime in April this year, and since then we're up and running production-wise as before.
Great. Peter, from Danish Broadcasting Corporation, different area of Europe. What has been happening at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation in the last year, and what do you do? I mean, I know a little bit, but give us the short version of that.
Sure. Hi, Monique. Thank you for having me here. I think, first of all, it's great being here today, and I believe that we should see each other more often for inspiration across borders. The most obvious reason is that the whole ecosystem is changing so much right now. And I think for the first time in history, we actually have basically the same competitors, and it will probably be even more so in the near future. We will probably all have Netflix, Disney, Amazon, and the new constellation from Warner and Discovery as the biggest competitors in our market. So I really think we should learn from each other. And yes, I represent DR. DR is a public service broadcaster. I think we are mostly known for our drama, most likely, such as Missing, The Bridge, Borgen. And I'm responsible for our OTT platform, our streaming platform, DRTV. And I think it's a good case to look into, as the transformation is really fast in our region for quite simple reasons, actually. The infrastructure in the Nordics of broadband has been highly developed for many years. We had high-speed internet in the whole country. To an affordable price, and that combined with a high penetration of tablets and so on. So due to these factors, the transformation towards streaming has been extremely fast, even for a traditional broadcaster, broadcaster.
Would you say would you say that your audience has been going further than the broadcasters have? I mean, have they left and gone to all the other services because they are so, onto streaming and on demand? And
I mean, Flow TV has been left, especially among the younger audiences. That I think from 3 to 45 years of age, there is a higher consumption of streaming than traditional Flow, and the development towards the elderly is very fast as well.
Yeah.
So there will be a tipping point quite soon where streaming will be bigger than traditional Flow.
Yeah, it goes very, very quickly there. What we wanted to talk about is, okay, you have this landscape unfolding, which, I mean, a few years ago, it was like, oh, the TV world, the telecom people are coming. And now it's TV and telecom people, oh, the big Americans are coming, the big four, taking away everything. And it really, really seems that even huge telco operations and huge TV operations from Europe are very small in comparison to the big players out there. In that big landscape, which is not fixed but developing, everybody has to find a role. And one of the things that definitely is happening, that everybody is trying out, okay, if the consumer wants everything on demand, one screen, let's put everything together, let's bundle things, or let's separate things. How do you diversify? And I would like to hear from all three of you what the different types of diversification make sense to you when you see this big world that's going on around you. Maybe Jan, you could start first. I mean, you started.
We've realized also from our experience in the linear world that what actually drives the viewers' interest is local content, and that's something that the big internationals will never have. Even though Netflix has tried to acquire some Czech content and they've managed, but it's very limited. and what really drives the interest on a day-to-day basis, because that's what we're looking at primarily when we talk about engaging viewers continuously. You need to provide new pieces of local content all the time. Yeah. So that's our key point. And
so your key point is a continuous stream of new local production, and to organize that, have you set up new production arms, or do you buy production companies, or what do you do to make that happen?
Well, again, we draw on our experience and know-how from the linear world. We've been producing the best quality local content. That's why we command about 40% audience share, and we just intend to replicate it in the online world. And we've engaged production companies. We're not making compromises on production quality. You know, the mindset that some players are taking when it's online, it needs to be low cost. That's something that we've buried right at the outset, because we know that would not be long-lived. Therefore, we're basically looking for, we're developing content that is top-notch from the interest perspective. For instance, we're drawing on our well-established TV content, which in the future will continue only in the SVOD world. We're engaging production companies to develop content based on famous true events, and we're basing series around true events. And we will be rolling these out towards the end of this year and next year. Plus, we have in development many ideas that will eventually turn themselves into series. And we actually, a few years down the road, we're looking at sizing up our production capacities to be able to provide one piece of content every month, so that the viewers know and they establish their habit.
One series every month, right? One new, which is a really strong strategic decision, and obviously takes a lot of talent and quality in the market and money, of course. So once you have developed this content, will you only put this on your own channels, or are you also open to, you know, work with VOD channels that want me? Because if it's really good, there's other people that will want to put it on their networks, right?
Yeah. Well, no, this is clearly something that we're investing for ourselves, and making sure we want to build our own service that we want to take a subscription revenue stream from. So it's a very selfishly conscious decision to build our own properties. There have been, it is fair to say that there have been attempts to coordinate or to consider a joint SVOD platform on the market, but since the interests of the key players on the market are not aligned 100%, we felt it's better for us to rely on ourselves and steam ahead with our service. And that's SVOD. Apart from that, we also have our AVOD service, which relies more on the traditional TV content with the 7-day catch-up window. And that's basically our diversification strategy.
No, but I understand a really strong content focus. I mean, this discussion is taking place all over Europe in different markets, both for radio actually as well as for video. I mean, for the Dutch market is also very small. For instance, should you not put the content of the private and public broadcasters together on one platform or not? And it's very hard, because these are competitors. At the same time, there's a big giant looming that might take everything away. Nuno, I think you have seen some of these strategies regarding content that are different than putting everything only on your own network, right? Could you explain a little bit what is happening in different markets when it comes to high quality content or very desirable content, how you can make that work for you as a broadcaster?
Absolutely. So I think there are two things that are defining the space of solution that broadcasters have, and we see it different places across the world. Particularly, I think there used to be this, let's call it regional dominance of a business model, which in Western Europe and the US, SVOD was seen as the dominant. In Asia and Africa, we saw advertising as the defining model, and both sides seemed for years and years to believe that they could not be transposed post borders. And I think that's a phenomenon that's now has been or is in the process of being completely eliminated. Most of the customers we engage, they pretty much want to be business model agnostic, which is quite a strange concept. But de facto just means that they need to be prepared from both offer, proposition, and technological standpoint to be able to offer any business model to any at the same time to the same segments, or more often in parallel to different segments. So while all the discussions in Europe were about SVOD a year ago, right now they're all about how can I do freemium SVOD, and with live overlaid in this concept in a way that hadn't been before, has live being sort of now part of all of it, and the word VOD being almost nonsensical because the discussion is so much bigger than that. Is how do they put their whole offer? And I think that's one defining element that I think is changing the industry, and I see the impact, and we've seen success stories all across. The second is the novelty that content now travels, and I think that has been a huge data point that showed up in the last 2 years or so. So we're all watching, everyone in the US is watching Spanish TV shows. I think in the Danish, Peter was already used to his shows having success outside of borders, but it was a relatively uncommon phenomenon that's become mainstream. And what we're seeing now is for players who are, for example, unable to cooperate in their local market, like you were mentioning, Jan, what we see is cooperation in foreign markets to gain scale becoming the dominant. I can tell you, for example, in Korea, we support a customer who's the aggregation of all the content providers, of the most relevant content providers, distributing globally in the US. In some places, like in India, we have Z5, which is a massive production house with a lot of local and localized subcultural elements, being extremely successful distributing globally to the US and pooling content providers that would be distributed in different places. So I think these two phenomena, the fact that the business case stopped becoming sort of your favorite one flavor for your market, but you're free to try them all, and that you can now monetize content. I think that your content can travel. I think for market, in European market, I think they open a completely different dynamic of how we can monetize and diversify being a broadcaster.
Peter, I mean, it was already mentioned that it's really interesting that you have Danish content travel the world, and very popular as well. Is this also part of your content strategy? I mean, are you really making these things for the international markets?
No, and we actually never have. I remember our former head of drama, she said, you have to be local to go global. So these shows have never been made for a bigger audience than the Danish. And that's probably part of their success. And that is a paradox when you compare it to Netflix, for instance, when you hear that local content from Europe streams really well in Argentina or something. They make it for the whole world, even though it's in different languages. But is it really local? You can ask yourself, you know? So I think what the game we are really in right now is definitely diversification. It's all about the proposition in this marketplace. Before we used to compete with local competitors, now it feels like a World Cup every single day, basically. And in order not to be forgotten against these giants, you really have to have something really distinct. And I think similar to what Jan was saying, it's very much about the local content. And for us, it's very much about the content mix as well, and the proposition. It's not something that we are really verbal about, but for me, it's very much about when you check into our platform, you check into reality. When you are going into other VOD services, you check out of reality, so to speak. So our platform needs pulse, it needs live, it's flesh and blood. It's very much about being current. Sometimes it's also about being live. It's also about gathering the Danish community when that's relevant. Watching things at the same time is still a human need, I believe. So
I'm still reeling from the Eurovision Song Festival. I mean, and I'm not the only one. It's a global as well as local story, which shows how strong the appeal can be of a joint experience, and also an experience which is not an American experience, so at all. But the when you talk about the strategy in the diversification, you focus very much on the local world. I'm just wondering what you feel about. I think all of us here in Europe really want there to be a strong local European market for content, because that's the closest to all our hearts. But there's of course discussion now that how do you stimulate strong local content, and one of the options is to force the Netflixes of the world to have a certain percentage of local content, which is interesting for the production companies who have more bias, but it is also the one thing that was very special for the local players. So now suddenly you can also have local material on somebody who's not local. What do you feel about that? And this also goes for Jan and Nuno.
Well, I think that's this will be the natural development of the marketplace. Where the demand is, the supply will come, and we're quite happy that that the local production talent has an opportunity to develop stuff that is commissioned by an international player. That's just fine. The market will adjust. Eventually, who's going to have the best content will win. We just don't believe it's going to be the multinationals that we will really be able and willing to focus so attentively and so deeply into each individual market in Europe to actually beat the local players.
Yeah. And Nuno, do you see that happening? I mean, you've already pointed out that the very local can become an interesting global service good. Do you see markets that are by themselves develop things? I mean, what are the conditions for a really strong product that can travel the world? Is there something you can say about it? Or, a strong diaspora will certainly help, but what else? You have Brazilians watching Dutch TV shows, why? We don't know. Yeah, it's super popular there.
I think there are a couple of elements to it. First, I think there's an cultural undercurrent of authenticity that is driving all these movements. And this is a multi-industry thing. It's like people don't want to go to Vegas, they want to experience genuine things. And this, what we're seeing is, and maybe the whole self-destruction of the Hollywood movie thing industry by essentially just making copycats of itself all the time has opened the space for this. And I feel people crave authenticity. And that's what explains, I think, the demand that there is for this kind of, let's call it European production values of a lot of the content that you see global success. And if you go back to the 20 years ago, you could argue the opposite. As we were in when you had the soap operas from both Argentina and Turkey being exported to 20 countries around. So I think there's a cultural undertrend, and I think it favors. The wind is in the sails of the local content producers, of the deep stories. But ultimately, this has always been about chasing the customer preference and where the customer mood and the sentiment is. And the one who adjusts the best gets there first. So I agree with Jan that people who are closer to the population can adapt at the pace that those looking at algorithms and mass market things defined by the American cannot. So I think that's an element. The second element is the world is global. There are expat communities of huge scale everywhere. And everyone has a friend who has showed them a Bollywood movie, which when I was a kid, that would have been impossible. And today, like everyone watches Turkish action scenes and Spanish thing that no one did. I grew up with Spanish content, although I was Portuguese, and I kept consuming it all my life. And I don't have an enormous connection to Spain, but I like the language. And I think that the global world favors this. So the third element enabler this is before the distribution channels were not there. So to engage with the global world, you actually had to go through an extremely complex distribution chain where a lot of decision makers in the middle took a business case approach to it and an investment approach that blocked that content from reaching the customer. And that no longer happens. So with technology sets like the one we put on the table, we actually allow the broadcasters to essentially focus on what they do best, which is the content and the proposition, the package. And they simply don't care about the technology stack. They don't care about how to reach customers, how to charge them. They don't have to care about how to keep up with the innovation that comes out of Silicon Valley. So because we're putting together upscale players.
Well, let's talk to the broadcasters about the digital platforms, because they do require different distribution strategy than linear channels. They have to, you have to work with your consumers to understand it. They have to buy it. So what are the main challenges for a broadcaster when you decide to, offer that content in many different ways? Who wants to go first?
I can do that. Yes, content is developing extremely fast, but the distribution part and the publishing side is definitely too. We no longer have any outlet for the big kids and young adults. We no longer have flow channels. So obviously that's a huge transformation for us, because it's a total different way of distributing your content. Every piece of content has to be chosen actively every single time. And that affects the production itself, the way we distribute, the way we publish it, and how you present it. And if we talk about how you present the content, let's just look at one very small little thing that has huge impact for us. At least that's what we have experienced. That is the thumbnail itself, that picture you click on. And we know that just flipping the thumbnail from horizontal to vertical on some genres have had such a huge impact that I first didn't believe the numbers. And I can't tell you why it is so, but there is an agreement among users apparently that fiction is always vertical, and the, let's say, epical documentary is the same. So we work much more with artwork.
I mean, the first time I understood that in Netflix, the thumbnail you see is actually different based on who you are and your preferences before. So I might see yellow colors, and whoever else might see something red with a gun in it for the same movie, not just a different movie, but the different thumbnail. It's a science. It's a science.
It is.
Yeah. So what do? You develop that yourself, or you just discover it and then tweak for it? Is this something you bought in as a service, or is this something you said like, oh, what this we have to do?
We have a very close cooperation in the Nordics between the public service broadcasters, and we are developing almost together or at the same time. I also know from other broadcasters they find the same conclusions. Which is very odd. I mean, for some production, we see growth rates by 10 times when we do it the right way. And I have never seen anything like that before. I mean, in the linear world, you lived of inheritance basically from the program before. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't exist anymore. So you have to be extremely attractive. And also we learned that you never click on content you don't know what is. So that's just an extreme effort in that every program needs to have some kind of knowledge connected to it. Okay. And that brings us into the world of IP, how important intellectual property is. And that's why big formats and big movies are so expensive, because it's sort of built in to the program itself. You know what it is, so you click on it. You don't click on anything you don't know what is.
And the big stories then can have 10 extra series and in movies and subsets, and the characters can be spun out or new, and because exactly. You already know it, right? You already know it. Okay, well, it's amazing because people do find new content, but they need to know about it first before they find it, of course. Jan, do you find the same struggles, but also the same surprises, and especially the things you don't expect are interesting, of course? So what happens with the new channels that you have developed, the new distribution methods?
Well, we actually, with our distribution, rely very much on one another. Still, the Czech market is specific with over 50% of free-to-air distribution terrestrial. Yeah, the distributors, as the telcos, they take up a sizable chunk of the rest. So they have their own ways of supporting content of individual players, even on the linear signal. And then there's our SVOD service. And to what Peter said we actually rely on our linear TV capability to make the new pieces of content that we portray on our SVOD service known. So we promote heavily, and we try zillions of different ways to promote on screen. We're promoting on our online properties. We use other online channels to promote our content that goes onto SVOD, and it's a trial and error thing, and we haven't discovered this thumbnail notion. That's very interesting, but we've learned a lot of things along the way, and we adjust every time.
What was something you learned that surprised you, that wasn't that you really had to experience to be able to use it and know about it?
So we've learned that making the brand of Volio, which is our SVOD service, known, and to increase traffic to it, brand communication on our main TV is the most efficient means. However, when promoting individual pieces of content, it's actually social media and other online properties where you can actually go into a little bit of a detail about an individual show, portray some really interesting aspects of it, and the viewers have a direct way to actually go.
And they can share it with each other and like it. The world of like. That's
Can I just, something you said, and the thing about testing, I think that our organization is definitely also changing, because we work much more in sort of like a beta mode, so to speak. We test and learn all the time. We have not done that in the same extent before. And the organization needs to adapt to this. In my world, we were used to, at 8 o'clock on Friday, we have to be there. And that was it. It was like, launching a rocket to the moon, but now you need to make so many mistakes. You need to try a lot of things, and the organization has to support this.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. And that's both in content choice and content promotion, in interaction devices.
Yeah. You have to try and be okay to make a mistake and look for an improvement along the way.
Now we have 13 minutes left, and I want to take this a little bit to the future. And I was wondering, at the moment, you have to have a strategy with the content to be interesting enough so you can fight off the Americans. You have to have a good distribution strategy, and all these things you have to work out and are based on what is happening in the world right now. But of course, technology and user habits are still changing. And I was wondering what, for the three of you see coming, where you think like, oh, something completely new is still happening, and this will eventually be part of my business as well, or will change my business. Where are we going if you look ahead? Is that tech that influences or user behavior that influences your strategy already now for the next 10 years? And it's a long time to look, but you do a lot of tech. Let's start with you.
I do think there's a lot coming up, and if you think about today, the revenue streams of linear TV, despite the challenges that have happened, are still very locked to the advertising model, and And if you look at different models, let's say an Instagram, for example, they're completely based on advertising and monetization with a lot of data. These two worlds of where the eyeballs are to a large extent on the video and where the new monetization mechanisms are, they haven't converged. So there isn't absolutely any reason why would someone buy a blouse from an influencer, but not from a Hollywood actress in a movie. So these opportunities have not been explored. There was skepticism about this, about the potential for the commerce layer, because the means too were not there and it was clumsy. But today, their entire businesses, some of them quite large scale, based around e-commerce, not to mention advertising, that's on social. Yeah. So the way we see this, we call this cognitive TV, is we essentially think that the live TV and the TV will essentially be overlaid by a layer of data that doesn't exist today. Every asset, every image, from Peter's brand of phones that he's using, to the blinders behind you, to the fan under beneath Jan, all of this will have a data point associated to it. It will be recognized by AI, it will be added metadata, and that will be used in a multiplicity of ways. Some of them subtle, like for example, the example of the images that carousel to the best person on the shop. But ultimately, you can also recommend content based on what's happening. If I'm very keen to things that happen on the beach, even if the title doesn't have a beach, you know that probably by recommending it and me consuming. The same thing goes for content for acquisition recommendations, for transactional elements. Car placement in James Bond were always a good way to show BMWs at the latest and Aston Martins before, but no one ever left and bought one or had the means to even try one at the end of a movie. Those layers today that seemed fantasy 15 years ago, today happen on a day-to-day basis on all the social networks, and they do not happen in the medium that reaches more people. And I think this will be transformational. This will require this has a lot of pre-enablers. The video live needs to become IP. That is happening slower, but it's happening. What we call SVOD is no longer SVOD because it includes live. So live TV will be distributed in a technological way that enables this, the seamless connection between the devices. And above all, I do think that this data pool is, as you mentioned, Peter, people used to move from, it was highly predictable. If you had a good show before, you have a good anchor for the next. The new world has no such strong correlations. It's all about how you get people engaged to get into them. And the moment they're engaged, how do you monetize the fact that they're there? Advertising, commerce. And that's not the core today of what I think the broadcasters are focusing on. They're focusing still on what I would call phase one of the transformation, moving from an ad-based linear model to essentially a multi-revenue, multi-content-driven, content-solely revenue stream, advertising, SVOD, whatever, subscription. But then there's a different layer. There's a completely different layer of how do I overlay all the business models that I've seen, from paid influencers to paid presence to m-commerce to news pushing subscriptions of services and transaction-based, Google-like click-based or transaction-based commissions. They all exist on the web, they all exist, and they haven't come together to the means that has more eyeballs. And I see it happening in the next few years.
Super interesting. It actually on the web, I mean, I come very much from the internet side of things. There you also have, of course, this vision of some companies that you know, the metaverse is coming. Tim Sweeney of Epic Games just got 1 billion together to build out his metaverse. These online worlds where people will move around in, and that are so much connected to popular culture as well. So there's a strong connection there as well. Jan and Peter, Vistas, 10 years from now.
Well, I think that we need to talk more about the relations to our users. I do not have the answers necessarily, but without doubt, I'm sure we need to have a stronger relation to our users. And in the old world, the strength of a program was all that we aimed for. And we start over and over again promoting a new show, and let's see if it works on TV. And that is such an expensive model that doesn't work. You need to have a frequent relation across platforms with many different pieces of content. We need to be in a place where the user is happy about notifications or signing up for newsletters and so on. So we need to invest in that way, not investing in TV channels and so on. We need to invest in building relations, I think.
Yeah. And that relation could change over time as well, but you could follow the users much more than you do now.
Definitely.
Yeah. And Jan?
Yeah, well, you know, as I mentioned earlier, we recognize already now the power of social media, and what Nunez was saying is, you know, bears much truth, even though we don't really see that far yet. But the potential of you know, exploiting the power of social media in combined with the data availability is potentially huge. Yeah, we're still learning that. We don't see there that far anyway yet, but it is. We're preparing everything to be able to operate in that kind of world. We've invested heavily into data collection, data analysis, business intelligence. So we know that there is a light at the end of that tunnel, which is actually not dark at all, but
very, very bright. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have to be learning along the way.
You know, the data game is of course a huge game as well, especially with now Google going without cookies, and I mean there's a whole battle going on right now in who is closest to the end user, knows most about the end user, collects all that data, and the broadcasters, in some cases private broadcasters, are trying to build up, you know, RTL for instance, build up their own data sets, but also buying in lots of data from third parties so that they can profile. And is this something you are also working on?
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Okay. Ladies, gentlemen, we have a few more minutes left. After this conversation, do you feel that, and after this whole day actually, do you feel that to grow this industry in more interesting ways, that new types of cooperations are needed? I mean, is it needed that, you know, some of the parties involved in this ecosystem start sharing notes, so to speak? I'm trying to find out how we get from here to there, those 10 years. And apart from everybody figuring out their personal strategy, if there is a joint strategy, something that everybody in this ecosystem needs to work on together, and what that could be. Who wants to answer that difficult question?
If I can jump in, from what I see in different places, I think one of the most specific challenges to the broadcaster group is average scale and fragmentation. So in the Silicon Valley, scale is tremendous. In the telco, it's, let's call it, used to be large, now it's sort of medium, but in the broadcast it's very fragmented. And I think that has played a role in the broadcasters not being able to catch up with the latest innovations, the latest business opportunities, and the latest monetization mechanisms. So I do feel that there's sort of opportunity to be frenemies with local competition, but global cooperation can be a defining force around sub-segments of product, which are each individual culture, each individual content type. And I see that the usually underestimating, there's been a tradition of underestimating the potential of the rest of the world when it comes to video content and local content. And I think that the numbers for those who have tried, the numbers have surprised, because the monetization, the margins, the availability to pay of people who are out of doors and want to consume this content might be very different from some of the markets. So I see that as a game changer, and I would strongly advise this sort of local competition with global cooperation from all broadcasters around single products, cultural identities.
Peter?
You said something about sharing notes. I think most definitely we should learn from each other. I also think we should, of course, cooperate with the international giants. I think, though, it's a highly delicate balance. It is sort of a risky strategy. We never know if they change algorithms. All of a sudden, they could decide.
They are not our friends. They are not our friends.
Not necessarily. They are businesses, and I think we just need to remember sometimes that our local democracies could be at stake here. Our cultures could be at stake. So of course, cooperate definitely, but we also need each other as European local broadcasters and VOD services. Collaborate, I would say.
All right. We need to wrap up. Jan, if you have one more sentence, you can share it now. Otherwise.
On this topic, I see a significant room for improvement when it comes to cooperation between the individual players on even one single market that are complementary. There's opportunity to improve cooperation between our distributors, between our telcos, who some of them also run their own TV channels. There could be content sharing between them and us. There could be improved distribution capacities of not only the channels but also the SWOT services, etc., etc. But so far everyone is slightly reluctant, I would say, to let go.
Okay. Well, we'll check back next year. Thank you all so much for sharing your ideas about the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And for everybody else, enjoy a little bit of sunshine and then back to the next session. Bye.
Bye-bye.